A very good afternoon to all of you. I'm Ankita Chauhan, part of NASSCOM Product Council. Today, we are formally beginning our Product Management Part 2 series, whose introductory session was conducted by Ram Narayanan, VP and Managing Site Director, R&D, VMware India on 19th of December, who spoke on product management in the age of digital transformation. Today, I have with me Tejswita Shrestha, Product Management and Marketing Leader with Optum, a part of UnitedHealth Group, and she will share her views on how do managers decide what to build. She will deliver her presentation for about 40-45 minutes, post which we will open the platform for the Q&A session. So please write questions anytime during the session which she would cater to, will try to answer most of them, keeping the time limit in mind as we have to finish it off within 60 minutes. And yes, do leave your feedback post session to help us improve our future episodes. Over to you, Tejaswita.
Uh, Thanks, Ankita, and hello, everyone. A very good afternoon to all. Thanks a lot for dialing in today. I would try my best to keep you guys awake in this post-lunch session. Now, in this session, what we would do is we would start with some examples, talk about some frameworks, apply them to a case study which we'll solve together, and then conclude. So hope you find the session informative. I will pause here for some time for the legal disclaimer from the NASSCOM side. So a little bit about myself. I've been with Optum since past 4 years, and I've been challenged every day with a variety of business problems. So here I am, honing my skills and applying it real time is the key to success in Optum. 14 years into product management, corporate strategy, product marketing, and management consulting. So I lead the product marketing and strategy functions from India. My team and I here provide insights into opportunity identification, market sizing, new feature decisions, competitive environment, product positioning, and also along with the development of products, which we generally do. My educational background is pretty much similar to a lot of you on the call, an engineering degree from BIT, and have done my MBA from XLRI Jamshedpur. So starting with the content I have planned for today, let's consider the products below. The first one is the Amazon Fire Phone, which made a mark as one of the biggest product failures of 2014. Although it fulfilled its purpose of comparing the best prices of products with just the click of a button, it failed to satisfy certain needs of consumers. Now, Amazon is so satisfied with the device's efficiency that they overlooked the other crucial factors. For example, the design had no visual appeal, which was a major factor in its failure. Now, in an age where everyone is concerned about looking fashionable and trendy, while still efficiently completing their tasks, Amazon Fire Phone just didn't appeal to consumers. Now, this is perhaps why they discontinued production after the initial stock in 2015. While the device was efficient for Amazon to meet their business objectives, I think it failed to meet the needs and wants of smartphone owners. The second example I have is the Home Depot. Now, Home Depot in China failed. Analysts do point out that the fact that a DIY or do-it-yourself culture does not exist in China. True, not true, I don't know. Because labor costs are relatively low, many homeowners would rather hire someone to do the work than do it themselves. Now, Home Depot made the mistake of not understanding the local market, which is often dramatically different from their home market. So as we are discussing about Home Depot's failure, now IKEA has been thriving at the same time in China. Now, what IKEA did right was to understand its customers and the change in market dynamics and the political and economical scenarios in China. So in the last 15 years, what has happened is that home ownership in China has grown from practically 0 to 70%. Now, however, many Chinese people have little sense of how to furnish or decorate a home. So now they are very eager to learn from the West. Now, this is one of the reasons that IKEA in the same segment is very popular in China. So understanding your market and your customers is indeed very, very important. So I really want you to keep these examples in mind as we are going through today's session. How do you decide what to build? Now, let's set the context right. I'm pretty sure we have a lot of product managers and owners amongst the audience today who do this today, day in and day out. I will first cover the general trends in the industry and then follow up with some frameworks. Founders. For some startups, smaller companies, the founders themselves decide what to build. As a product owner, you just go and develop. Stakeholders. Now, stakeholders could be your sales, marketing, your business unit head, your boss, and the endless list of influential people in your organization. Now, they are the real movers and shakers in the larger enterprises. So you're guided by your stakeholders' decision, and you just go ahead and build your product. The third one is all about hunch. Now, this one is very, very interesting because sometimes it does click. But in today's session, we would not talk about how to train your gut. What about industry experts? Now, reading white papers, understanding trends, and hence implementing their suggestions. So some of the product managers and business analysts do go ahead and read a lot of industry experts, and they do go ahead and apply them directly. Agile. Now, this one is interesting because a lot of these business analysts and product owners who've mentioned that because they're agile, they develop something every sprint, which is an add-on to the previous. So, being agile can decide what to build. Visionary. Now, you just get it and you just build it. So, I'm not going to comment here as well. So, what about product managers? This is like similar our own community, which is especially for the product development teams, business analysts, system analysts who get requirements from their product managers to develop the features. Competitors. Let's copy from the competitors. So how your product strategy is solely driven by your competitors. They build it now and then you build it 6 months later. Loudness. Loud customers are always heard. So you go ahead and develop something which suits your loudest customers, and then etc. and etc. So wherein none of them is the right way to decide. So what is the proper way? It is research. So it is all about finding the right market problem and understanding it in depth. So when we talk about research, it can be secondary or primary research. So why I said both, because sometimes primary researches may be too costly to start with. So you go ahead and do your level of research from secondary sources and then arriving at the target segment for your FGDs or for your primary research. And it's also quite possible that your current organization might be already engaging with an external company for such a research. But it is always good to do some level of data collection yourself to ask the right questions to your external partner. So if you know the market, you really need to know the domain well for you to ask the right questions and intelligent questions from your research partner. So in an enterprise, from where you can start, maybe especially in an established organization like ours, you can start with from your marketing unit, or maybe from your NPS scores or NPS feedback or customer feedback surveys, apart from the reading content online and reports, industry reports. So what is it all about? It's all about reading, talking to people, and organizing the information to frame the right strategy. Moving ahead, before starting on your research and analysis, it is imperative to set the objective right. Why exactly you're trying to do this? As different objectives would have different approaches towards solving the same problem. Now we would talk about some concepts around the objectives for different scenarios. The first one is the new product idea. Now, this may or may not be a blue ocean opportunity, yet would need a different lens altogether. What about new geography? Now, this can be entering a new market with the same product or customized offering for the new geography. Either way. Third could be an existing product. Now, intent could be different, but this is one of the most common scenarios we face day in and day out. It can be all about revenue growth, customer stickiness, etc. There. What about other product scenarios? So we would also talk about some more product scenarios and implications with some examples and some ifs and buts. Again, moving towards the first one, thinking about a new product. So when we talk about this concept, step 0 remains the most important. It is all about identifying the right market problem. Now, this one is core and non-negotiable for any context whatsoever. You cannot start with a solution and then try to fit it in a problem. Let's take the reference of Dunzo here. Now, I love this app in itself because it's solving a real problem, and especially in Bangalore, if you're stuck in traffic. Dunzo is one organization, one startup which has been saving a lot of us on the college as well. So what did they do right? So why should I do the things I do not enjoy? So there was a gap in the market that the co-founders identified in the market, and then it became the cornerstone for Dunzo. A WhatsApp group was created and friends started requesting to run their daily errands for them. Now, getting tasks done by someone else is not new. There's nothing newness in there, because drivers are asked to pick up vegetables, the security guard is requested to courier documents, your domestic worker, she or he goes and buys vegetables for their way to work. So what is Dunzo doing? Dunzo is just democratizing the process. So they identified the right market problem. Think about your customers. Who are your customers? How can you best reach them? How can you ensure that you retain them? So again, expanding on the last example, maybe consider Bangalore. It's all about busy IT folks like us who do not have time for the concierge items and are looking for some help there. So you can build on so many personas here. Let's talk about the product. Now, when you think about your product, what's special about the product? Thinking about product differentiation. Are there similar products out there? Are there substitutes? What are the advantages and disadvantages of this new product which you're thinking? What about synergies? Synergies with your organization's offering is very, very important, especially if you're in an enterprise and trying to think about a new product. Now, we can talk about in this regard a lot. Now, anyways, moving ahead, think about your market strategy. Are we cannibalizing or replacing one of our existing products? What about how will this expand our customer base? For example, will it increase our sales? And while we are trying to implement all this market strategy, what will be the competitive response be? Will they be sitting silent, or will they be doing certain strategies which would actually impact our product features? So these all things are very, very important. Let's talk about the next one, which is all about thinking about financing. It's important because how is your project being funded? Even in an enterprise or a startup, you really need to think about financing a lot. What is the best allocation for funds, and etc. So thinking about a new product needs a very varied lens when you're trying to actually develop that product. Let's talk about a new market. Let's talk about this framework because it'll help you while you're trying to enter a new market. The most important reason here is to understand the why before we start. What's our goal? What's the objective? Does it fit into an overall strategy? And then go ahead and determine the state of the current and future market. So size of the market and the growth rate is very important. Stage of development, is it emerging, is it mature, is it declining? Now, investigating the market is very, very important to determine whether entry would make a very good business sense. We have been talking about competition a lot, but then these are like non-negotiable items. So I will again reiterate it. Who is our competition, their products and services, what size market share does each competitor have, and how will you price your product in such a scenario? Are there any barriers to entry or exit? For example, what are the risks? It's very important to analyze your risks, your market regulations and technology, especially for a fintech or a health tech, where regulations play a very, very important role while you're trying to enter a new market. Even even I mentioned health tech and fintech, but what about, I think we all know how Uber got kicked off out of China because of these regulations and other changes in the country. So we really need to be aware of the country regulations a lot. A very common scenario for larger enterprises as well. Now, if we decide to enter the market, we need to figure out the best way to become a player. What do we do? Now, start from scratch or build, acquire an existing player within the desired industry, or form a joint venture or a strategic alliance with another player with similar interests. Now, analyzing the pros and cons of each, this is very, very important, because this is, sometimes people call it and frame it as a cost benefit analysis. You can use this whenever you're trying to decide whether to proceed with a decision. So entering yes, and if it's a yes, then we have to analyze on all the three aspects of build, buy, partner. Uh, Coming from an engineering background, all the product managers tend to move towards build. They directly jump onto build, and they get into this development mode where they write user stories, etc., etc. But be aware of the fact that buying and partnering are also very good options, especially when you're trying to reduce your time to market. Competitive response. Now, sometimes we do face the dilemma of whether or not to copy from our customers. It is quite possible that the organization's strategy itself is to follow the market leader. So we generally respond to what others provide. Nothing wrong in that, unless the overall strategy is not solely driven by this. So the beauty about competitive response is that in some of these cases, pure play product strategies accompanied by business strategies of M&A, talent acquisition, or even strategic partnerships. So if you're talking about a competitive response, even hiring your competitors' management, aggressive marketing campaign would be something which your management or your higher product management would be thinking about. So as a product manager, you should be acquainted with those strategies, or in case you are thinking about a feature which would copy your competitor, please go ahead and check with your management whether this is something also which they are thinking on the something on the lines. Now, some more product scenarios. Now, this framework is also very similar to the typical BCG matrix taught in B schools with a product flavor. So I've added some product flavor around it. The first one is all around emerging growth stage. Now, when your product is just born, in this stage, it's all about acquisition of customers. You need to concentrate on product development, competition, and pricing. Now, emerging growth example could be something like, we've already talked about Dunzo. So Dunzo could be something which comes here in the emerging growth stage. The second one is the growth stage. If you want more and more customers to be using your product, now you need to really emphasize on marketing and competition. So here I could think about maybe Swiggy, which has already surpassed the emerging growth stage and is in the growth stage and trying to emphasize a lot on marketing and competition here. Let's talk about the mature stage. A stable product needs innovation the most. So I am pretty hopeful that majority of us in the audience belong to this part of the pie. So the second most important aspect is bringing in cost efficiency and not losing the sight of what your competitors are thinking next. So here I would definitely want to mention as an example would be a Big Basket, because it seems to be in a mature stage. But then more than Big Basket, I would want to mention about Nokia. And why Nokia? Because this is something where we should mention what they did not do. Now, relying only on the Symbian operating systems, Nokia failed to adapt early to the software shift in the market. Now, it was only concentrating on the on hardware and not on what other players were doing in the market. So they also overestimated the strength of their brand and assumed that even if they are late to the market, they'll be able to catch up quickly. Now with Samsung expanding base in India, investing in R&D, with launch of iPhones, iOS, people like us didn't take time to forget about Nokia. Now, again, for a company that at one point forced its competitors to be mere spectators in the industry, lost the game just because of lack of innovation, overestimations, and failure to adapt. Now, business strategies seem fairly simple unless you really practice them in the business. So, the fundamentals of any business require extensive knowledge and obviously expansive research. Let's talk about declining stage. Now, it's important to define the niche segment at this stage for efficient development and marketing efforts. You can even think about an exit strategy at this point. An example for the declining stage could be somebody like a Google Plus. Launched with so much promise of being a viable competitor to Facebook, Google Plus ended up as a social media platform because it was having a declining user base and other problems which we had in terms of data leakage, etc. But then they were quick to react, and they have actually exited out of. They've decided to close down on Google Plus. That's a fair strategy at the point where you realize that your product is not going to kick out. Now, lastly, let's summarize with a detailed market analysis before we move towards the actual case study. Now, we've already covered some flavors of it in the past. Now, let's spend a minute on integration touchpoints. I think we've not covered that. This it is indeed very, very important for larger enterprises, and especially in healthcare. Now, as a product manager, it's important to understand the various platforms you integrate with, and also to assess the GTM strategies you've been following with different players. So you need to have information on all of them together when you're deciding about your product roadmap. Sometimes it happens that your internal feature update can cause ripple effects in the way product has been operating with other vendors in the market. So you need to be really, really cautious about it. Let's take a B2C example again, because I think people relate to a B2C example more than a B2B example. So I would want to take an example of Myntra and InMobi. Now, InMobi helped Myntra drive incremental sales from existing customers. It also retargeted all Myntra app users with highly personalized, curated product recommendations based on previous shopping activity. Now, as the largest partner for Myntra in terms of transaction volume, etc., etc., do you think Myntra can go ahead and upgrade anything which will not be informed to InMobi's? So if Myntra needs to update a feature linked to InMobi's functionality, you really need your strategic partner to know and upgrade similarly. So planning your product in agreement with InMobi or in mutual relationship with your vendor is very, very important, and they need to be stitched together within your roadmap and within your product planning itself. So this is the whole ecosystem where your product would thrive. So it is indeed important to analyze this market at every level. These lenses, and I agree that these lenses may or may not apply, but then this is to structure your thought process for a very situation a product manager goes through day in and day out. I'll pause here and then move to the sample market problem. Now, I've taken an online grocery market in US. Now, let's imagine a case where I am the product manager of an online grocery in US, and I've been asked to define the features and roadmap of the platform. Now, this would be an existing platform with a decent throughput, and the goal is to increase revenue or engagement. I would want to talk about the steps a product manager should or would take before defining the features. Now, this is also one of those methods which would help the product managers, especially who are managing their products remotely from a location like India, and then they can actually think about what all steps they can also do so that they become a part of the strategic roadmap, which is generally happening from US, and they have more context. Now, due to paucity of time and vastness of topic, I've taken a mini route to the roadmap definition, but I'm sure it would give a fair amount of idea to the folks on the call on the process. Now, here, feel free to add on to the points in the chat window. More than questions, I would love to hear the different perspectives you have, and I would definitely share it with everyone on the call. let's start with the first one. Now, the first slide is all about market analysis. You can take help of industry reports, social platforms, news articles to arrive at the market size and growth numbers. For example, in this case, it's important that we track the year-on-year growth and change in consumer behavior for this market. I have used an ATK report for this analysis, but then you can just, this is just for reference. For example, it's very important that you track the change in your consumer behavior. Here, if you see that few trends which are something which should be noted. For example, the online total grocery market is supposed to get doubled by 2022. And then it represents a 20 billion growth opportunity. It's also growing at a CAGR of 15 to 18%, which means it's a very fertile ground to play on. Then again, you can also read about, like, for example, click and collect market, which is very in contrary to the Indian market, is emerging as a dominant and more economically sound market in US, wherein in India we prefer more and more home delivery. So the market is different, and you really need to understand. So what did you understand by going through a market overview? What we figured out was change in consumer online behavior and market dynamics are posing a big opportunity to actually go ahead and invest more and more in this product. The second one is competitor analysis. Now, this is again an example. We've been talking about competitor analysis till now, and this is again an example talking about how Amazon or Walmart or Targets of the world have been performing in the grocery space. You also need to do a SWOT analysis of each of these organizations in your competitive cluster to understand your opportunity space. So you can define your competitive cluster that, okay, I compete with XYZ and I do not compete with ABC. So let me define where I play in, and then I decide on my next strategy. This would also help you in researching further to understand the pain points in each of these segments. Now, doing a SWOT analysis would also help you in figuring out the opportunity area in this space. Now, again, imagine Amazon is your immediate competitor. Let's see what's lagging that side. And this is again a disclaimer from my side. This is just a reference and for a sample case study, and this may or may not be true in actual. So coming back, though Amazon is indeed the market leader in online grocery, it has not been able to persuade the customers to buy perishable items. Now, customers generally buy from Amazon non-perishable items and utilize its Prime Now benefits. So what we're trying to do is trying to find opportunities by doing SWOT analysis of the competitors. And here we have figured out there's some problem with the perishable items. And then maybe as a player in the same segment, you can actually think about doing something, solving this market problem, and in return, trying to increase your net revenue. Now, identifying the market problem. That's the magic key to success for all PMs here. Here I've taken references from a report, but it's always advisable to do primary research at this point and revalidate your findings if possible. So this is only for reference. So then if you go ahead and do an FGD or maybe a primary survey, it's always beneficial that you go ahead and revalidate your findings. So as per my analysis, the inability to identify freshness is stopping people from buying perishable goods. So you can even go ahead and talk to your sales representatives or business executives and understand if you're managing if you're managing the product definitely remotely. So you need to talk to these people around to figure out the real problems. Here we have two themes which are coming up very, very clearly. The first one is all about quality, cost, and convenience, which is, I think, it's for people who are already on your platform and are looking for more features. The second one is all about whether you would go ahead and buy from an online grocery platform, and these are definitely for the new customer acquisition. So, as we have already talked about, define your goal, maybe maybe the objective. I have taken the objective to be increasing cart value of existing customers for now, but then you can also choose the other one depending upon the need. So here we are talking about like two priorities: new customer acquisition, where savings, convenience, and speed are very, very important, and then we're talking about increasing cart value, wherein people have quality concerns, cost and convenience, and these are the themes which are coming up. So for the purpose of the case study, I will choose a theme based on the four parameters: customer satisfaction, lower investment, quick to market, and low complexity. And these parameters are always helpful when you're trying to decide something very quickly as well. Let's talk about the persona analysis. I think we've chalked down general characteristics, loyalty to the brand, then our target segment, and why we have chosen some can be based on your overall goal and pain points. Here I would want to definitely mention about the first few of the relevant ones. The first one is all about the discount shoppers. Now, these are the people who are in constant lookout for discounts online and offline. Now, they will switch medium depending upon low price. They have very low loyalty to the brand. So, in case you are planning something for them, do you want them to be the target segment? May not be. I do not know. But for the purpose of the case study, I've kept them as a maybe. The second one, important ones, are the family buyers. Now, here the main grocery buyer is usually a parent, which is buying grocery in bulk. Now, these purchases will be fairly regular, and they will definitely look for promotional offers. Their loyalty to the brand is little medium, but then you might want to consider them as a target segment for this case. The other three sets, which are very, very important, which I think because we chose quality as a theme, we would want to consider health-conscious folks. Now, health-conscious folks are the folks who are actually looking for a fresh, natural, fat-free, low-carb, vegetarian, gluten-free, and etc., etc. And these are definitely the people who will be loyal to your brand. In case you provide them the right solution to the market problem, they will stick to your brand. And this would definitely should be your target segment for this case. What about your high-end customers? Now, this segment is tend to be attracted to quality, both in terms of online, offline, and they're really looking for high-end products and organic and etc. and maybe imported, fresh from farm and others. So they are also very highly loyal to the brand, and they should be or would be your target segment for this case. What about repeat buyers? Now, grocery shopping, they consider grocery shopping as a core. So they seek to reduce time, effort, and cost associated with shopping. So they can be a highly brand loyal to your platform if you do provide the right amount of services. Target segment for this case, maybe yes. Now we need to define themes to work on maximum for maximum productivity. Now here I've chosen the perception of quality as the main theme to progress further. What exactly I've picked up is increasing cart value, I have quality, convenience, and then again the third one is also in the convenience theme. Freshness of food, same as in store. This is what people are looking for. Benefit is really, really high. Revenue impact, medium to high. Technical complexity is low. Again, it's an assumption. It can be low or high depending upon your product. And then a time frame, which is again a t-shirt sizing or a guesstimation at this moment, which would be less than 1 year. Now, based on these 3 or 4 parameters, as a product manager, I feel maybe if I deliver something on quality, it would have a maximum impact, and then I would go to other themes for analyzing them as well. Here I've plotted a detailed customer experience journey in online grocery shopping. You can frame similar ones for yourself as well, because it's always helpful to plot the customer journey map for your product. It comes in handy while analyzing or deciding on any product feature. Now, this would clearly point out the various touch points for your customer and the probable impact. Now, here we would talk in detail why a particular framework has been created and how you can create similar one for your product. Now, if we start talking about the customer journey, it starts with awareness, followed by consideration, then the decision and delivery, and then loyalty. Now, we've also taken x-axis where the y-axis where we've talked about customer activities. Now, customer activities talks about what all a customer would be doing at this stage of purchase. We would also talk about customer goals. Now, what is the problem he's trying to solve for himself? These are the customer goals where you can actually pin down what exactly the customer is trying to solve at each of these touch points. Let's talk about how is the customer interacting with your product. The touch points are very, very important, be it your website or mobile app or in person, or you have a store as well, and then you have an offline a store, then you have an online app catering to that. You can actually have a similar touch point mapping as well. What about customer experience level? How a bad experience or a bad release would impact your customer? It's important that you pinpoint it and you be extra cautious about your releases, because if there's a very high impact, you're really going to have a business impact and a revenue impact, a direct revenue impact then and there. What about the customer the business goal? Now, your product's business goal and their KPIs to track them. You really need to mention your KPIs and business goals at every stage so that you know what you're actually running for. So you should know your goal first. What about the product enhancement features and collaboration with teams? Now, it's very important that you understand, and especially when we talk about an enterprise product management or a platform product management or a person who's working in a B2C environment, he or she needs to actually collaborate with a lot of teams, marketing teams, communication teams, UI, UX, and etc. So it's always important that you know if you are going to develop or suggest a feature in an X segment, what all collaboration you would be required to do. This comes very handy, and you can just keep it as a reference on your desktop or near your seat, so that you can actually pinpoint and you know which all emails you need to send. Let's particularly talk about maybe two of them, and it's a pretty vast one, so I've just picked two of them. What about decision? Now, here I've just taken the decision part of a customer who's actually trying to check out. Now, what exactly is are the customer activities? He's added groceries to the cart. His goal is to find select product easily, and it should be conveniently located. Touch points are all about mobile, website, and app. What about customer experience? It's very high. So business goals is all about increasing shopping cart value and conversion rate. You should also talk about the KPIs, shopping cart value, conversion rate, etc., etc. Now, what about collaboration with teams? We're talking about the catalog team, the UI UX team, the dispatch team, the storage team, the supply integration. So you've gone beyond your product only, and you're actually stepping into now you're the supply chain of the product as well. So it's important that you stitch the story together and you understand the implications of the product feature. Now let's talk about loyalty and advocacy. It's all about your repeat and loyal customers who are trying to order again. They would be what's the customer goal? Just go ahead and repeat, and I would want to repeat. Maybe you would want to provide suggestions to such customers, or you've done or an alert to the customer saying that maybe the month is over and you will want to repeat something there. Touch points, obviously, computer, mobile, phone, email, maybe an email reminder to them. What about customer experience? It's very high. Business goals is increase in retention rate and obviously increase in cart value or order value here. We are talking about what would you track after that the feature is released? Maybe the retention rate, order value, frequency, etc., etc. Collaboration with team. Now here I've just mentioned marketing, but obviously you would need to mention it, collaborate with others as well in case you are building a new feature or a new innovative feature. Maybe you want to go back and do again the sanity check with all the other teams which you have been working with. Moving ahead, we'll talk about market sizing and financial projections for the feature. We generally don't do it at feature by feature level, but then yeah, we do it at the epic feature at the epic feature level. So if there is a big release, we definitely would want to see what exactly this is going to bring to your organization. I have particularly mentioned about a TAM, which is a total addressable market. Now, this is the entire market for the product sector or industry. This does exclude competition, so as if you are the only source to buy from. It also represents the magnitude of interest in the kind of product or services your business offers. So every product has competition, so TAM is never reached by one company. Let's talk about SAM, which is serviceable available market. Now, this is the portion of TAM you're growing your company to reach, and as is reflected in your financials. Now, this also excludes competition. You are the only source to buy from. Again, every product has a competition, so SAM is rarely reached by one company. So moving on to SOM, which is a serviceable obtainable market. So this is the portion of the SAM you're starting with in order to grow or scale it over time. This includes competition. So you will not be the only source to buy from. It represents the magnitude of interest in your product or service, capturing a significant percentage of SAM while using your distribution channel. So your business plan and sales assumptions must support the SOM figures to indicate that you do understand the market and how you are going to capture market share through customer sales. So this is indeed very, very important. One thing I would want to mention is, what do TAM, SAM, or SOM figures? Now, these are very trendy terms, and you would hear them on your floor day in and day out. So what do they mean to the investor or the funding team? Now, the investor or the funding team are looking at the practicality or the reasonableness of your market assumptions and research to determine how risky you investing in a business would be. So imagine if your SAM figures are too large of a percentage of a SAM, the investor would doubt on your plan and believe that the chance of achieving your estimates would be too low, and then they would not consider investing in your plan. For example, if your SOM is too small as a percentage of SAM, then again the investor will not get a large enough return for the investment when the company is sold. So SOM gives the investor the most important information what you think about you can achieve by working on your business plan. So if your business can achieve a significant percentage of SAM over a reasonable time, then you gain credibility with the investors. Pricing. I think pricing also needs to be defined at this point in case it's a new one. But then in case it's an add-on, maybe you can decide on what additional money you would want to cater to. It can also be based on cost plus or value based, depending upon willingness to pay by the customers. Now, NASSCOM Product Connect, as far as I remember, has already conducted a detailed session on pricing just a few weeks back. So I would skip this in my session and will not go in detail. Let's talk about prioritizing your backlog. Now, here I've talked about weighted shortest job first. Obviously, this is not the best framework in town, and you can actually get a lot of similar prioritization techniques like the Kano model, Moscow, buyer, feature, etc., etc. Depending upon the products you offer and markets you operate in, you can choose any one of them. Here, for the sake of the case study, I've taken the WSJF method. Now, what WSJF method is all about, assigning a weight or a value to each job, and then dividing by the length of the job in order to determine the relative ranking. Now, the first one is obviously the user or the business value. This is again a relative score which you give from 1 to 10. It's also suggested that you use the Fibonacci series like 1, 2, 3, 5, 8, 13, and because the more you move to a larger number, it's less precise, and using Fibonacci makes consensus easier. The second one is time criticality. Now, this indicates the importance of doing the project now. If a project is highly time critical, then our competitors are considering it as well. So if you're not the first to market, then the value we can capture will be limited. Projects that are not time critical have a longer shelf life. The third one I would want to talk about is risk reduction and opportunity enablement. This indicates the project either positions the company to make a follow-on projects, or mitigates risk. Moving to the cloud, for example, might not generate revenue directly, but then it might again reduce data center failure risk while making future work faster. So again, this area it talks about both opportunity enablement as well as risk reduction, so that you know that when you're prioritizing your feature, you're actually taking care of a lot of these different lenses. Now, this method is obviously also not without flaws. To use the formula, you need the value of the variable, and that's where it gets very, very tricky, because determining the cost of delay itself can be very tricky, especially on one-time projects. A larger retailer like Target, Walmart, or McDonald's might be able to tell the cost of delay for opening a store, because they have a lot of stores, given enough existing stores, a lot of demographic data and data from competing stores. Any data analyst in that organization might be able to calculate the sale, profit, and let them know the cost of delay. Now, all that relies on the law of large data, on having large data sets, and then this becomes very, very meaningful. Now, in softwares, you can only be effective when the largest of companies create a new product that is very similar to what came before. For example, it might work when Microsoft releases the next version of an educational package, because but for all internal software or even new product development, without strong financially validated experiments, cost of delay may sound like just another guess. But then again, it's a calculated guess. Again, coming back to our example, as you see that there's the list of features on your roadmap from what we chose quality as a theme, and the next step is prioritization. So again, I've used a tweaked version of WSJF to make it more and more understandable. I've also added inter-team dependency as one of the extra points, plotting values again on benefit to the customer, business value, time frame, and then you can actually decide which one would go first. Now, it's always now here. However, again the beauty at this stage is again the set of influencers who would try to reprioritize your features at this stage. But again, it's important to align the rationale of reprioritization and asking the right questions to your stakeholders to get more clarity. It's also possible to give you that they give you better insights on the decision taken, which you were not aware of. So again, a framework is here, but then again, asking the right questions also would help in case you are being influenced by any of your stakeholders. Here I have a sample. I've written some sample epic features, user stories, and a release plan. Again, it's important to that we decide on metrics to track, especially in a B2C business, which would decide on the success and failure of a feature. Now, again, here we have talked about maybe provide use by date or procured date on perishable items, provide ability to capture photo, WhatsApp while selecting the producer. It can be a number of things. Again, this is for sample and is not the actual feature which should go into the product. But then again, metrics to track. You really need to have your metrics in place before even releasing your feature, so that you know that how successful you have been and you can take learnings from your releases. Again, these are based on assumptions the team is technically qualified, etc., etc. But then I'm pretty sure all of yours roadmap would look similar to that. I've used a program increment because we follow a SAFe in our organization, and we generally do follow this framework for defining our roadmap. What about marketing and training investment? Now, also consider leveraging partnerships with different departments within the organization to execute this feature. Not missing the launch part, definitely, where we need additional help in larger enterprises with demos, presentations, launch plans, partnering with vendors, social media launches, etc., etc. Now, this may or this is how I think I would frame up my business plan or business case. This may or may not be the bucket list of all the frameworks a business canvas would need, but then the intent was to cover the varied lenses a product manager or a product strategist may use before arriving at a feature. So, and again, there are a lot of other different templates and frameworks which would be already prevalent in your organization. Now, those have also been designed to suit the maturity state and the geography in which you operate in. So please use this today's session as a supplement to your list. I would want to close this session with a thought. At the end of the day, your job isn't to get the requirements right. Your job is to change the world. So as a product manager, while you're working on the minute details, we should never lose vision. Thank you. Now, Ankita, we can actually open up for Q&A. Sorry for being like 2 minutes up the original one. Yeah.
Not an issue. So, let's just start the Q&A session. So the first question is by Anamika. She's asking you, Tej, how do you decide on the personas? Is it just based on research and your own institution? How do you become sure you are at least considering all the personas before deciding which ones to target?
Okay, so a very interesting question. I think we can talk in length about how do you decide on personas, but then to give a brief overview, what we generally do practically in case you are live. For example, if you're working, when I was working for Airtel Money in my past organization, I was in the market where I was operating in. So I can actually go out, and once I have decided, done my initial market analysis, I would know that this might be your typical personas which you would want to go ahead with. Now, these are very generic when you start off with. These are not concrete. So you really need to start with some assumption. Then what we do is that we go ahead and talk to people and figure out the problems and do a certain level of primary research. And then you again stitch it back to what you have figured out. So it's again a to and fro. It's not a pure play step 1 to step 2 to step 3. You actually go a lot of to and fro before you actually freeze on some of these personas. And B2C is and in India, it is very easy because you can do a lot of these primary researches yourself. For example, a target persona, when I was talking about Danzo, we know about IT professionals. So you can just go around on your floor and you can figure out that there are similar personas on the floor, and then you can go ahead, go back and talk to your friends and families and others. But then, yeah, the other portion becomes very, very difficult when you're talking about doing a product management from a remote location, for example, from India. And then when you're trying to do persona analysis for somebody in US, what we do generally in those cases, again, we come up with those industry trends and reports and others, and definitely we come up with a generic problem trends before even defining personas, because these might be some of these problems. And then we club 2 or 3 problems together to define maybe a person X, and obviously it's followed up with primary research and FGD. So in our organization, we take help a lot from our market research team, who will do an FGD for us before actually freezing on the persona. So again, when we talk about persona here, this is again a post-research, again a pre-research. So that's again, there's no concrete answer to it, but yes, this is how we do it in an enterprise as well as in a B2C environment.
Okay, thanks, Tej. The next question is by Alicia, who is asking, where does launching an MVP and testing the value proposition fit into this?
So, launching an MVP and testing the value proposition. MVPs, again, it depends a lot on the environment in which you are working. So if you are a startup, you would want to do an initial brainstorming and just launch. And these all things are mandatory to be done for any other launch. So this is not something which you need to do, which is optional for the startups. This is something which you need to do. Yes, the extent to which you want to do and apply and the time you want to spend on such initiatives can be different. For example, if you are a startup and you really want to hit the market sooner, maybe you would want to cut down on each of these steps and generally do a asset check and then go and do an MVP. But then for an enterprise, for example, the environment in which we work on, fintech, health tech, you really cannot do an MVP unless you've really catered to all the regulations and you've seen how the consumers are behaving, because the costs are high and the repercussions are also very high. There is a company brand name at stake and others. So again, the environment in which you develop and you are trying to launch your product also depends. But again, the steps which I have told in my presentation are something which you obviously need to think about, have this as a lens, and then go ahead and launch your MVP.
All right. The next question is, what is an effective technique for estimating development timeline?
So development timeline is very dicey, because as a product manager, you generally can only ask the right questions before your team is actually trying to give an estimate. So what we generally do is we bring in those product features and clarity, and we just talk to the team. Now, it also depends upon the skill set of your team. For example, if your team is comprising of a lot of these skilled architects and skilled developers, and even the engineers are good, the QAs are expert, so the timeline itself goes down. But then, for example, if somebody quits and a fresher joins your team, it's an entirely different gamut of things. There you need to be accommodated to the fact that somebody has just not joined and there'll be a learning curve with it. So again, and if there's no magic figure to the estimate, because you feel that it can be done in 2 weeks, it should be done in 2 weeks. It's all about what the team feels. So engineering managers and engineering developers and QAs together have to sit together, figure out the intricacies, the technology, the technology complications, the upgrades, and then again it has to be a mutual decision. From your side, you need to really convey the customer priorities, how it's going to hit the market, and what exactly you need to do. So that's the beauty of prioritization, which we have been talking till now, because you might go to your team with maybe 5 or 6 features, and then your team would say, okay, for X, I would need maybe 2 weeks, but because you're asking a feature Y as well, I would need maybe 4 more weeks. So you can decide based on your job size, which I've already mentioned on my framework, and then you can actually prioritize which one you would want to do. That's again a tough call, but then that's the job of a product manager.
All right. The another question is, in an ideal case, all the backlogs can have different priorities. However, in real world scenario, we get a lot of conflicting same priority items from execs. How do you trade them off?
This is again an interesting one. I think we've been talking about it a lot, wherein you get influenced by your stakeholders, and then the sudden change in your loudest customer, and he or she wants some feature to be introduced in your backlog. So again, you get everything together, but then you need to really be talking about the things that your resources are very limited, and your resources in this regard are your people. So you need to be very empathetic towards your people, because ultimately if you bow down to the incoming pressure, your team is going to be demotivated. So if you were thinking that you would go ahead and ask them to come over the weekends and develop a feature and then stretch their time during the day, I don't think it would. Maybe it works out for a month or two, but in due course of time, you would figure out that maybe they start estimating it on the higher side. So again, this is a job of a product manager, where you should know when to say no. So when there are a lot of these incoming features from all of your stakeholders, you need to prioritize and ask the right questions. That okay, even if I have 5 or 6 features which are saying I should do in this sprint, or maybe in this program increment, I may not be able to do. So which of those ones maybe I'll do a Moscow on them, must, should, could, and would, and then maybe take a call. So again, a job of a product manager together is to say no to the things which are not required. Be empathetic towards the team, developers and QA, and obviously trying to understand the other side as well. When you are obviously you are the person who's going to be the voice of the customer and market of facing, etc., etc. But then obviously you should never leave the sight of the people who are actually going to develop your product.
All right, Tej. The next question is, if we target audience from some niche background, how to attract them with the product and cost in heavy competition?
Again, this is very confusing because we are talking about niche segment. This is what I mean, niche segment, as well as we are talking about a heavy competition. My suggestion would be, you don't go to a niche segment with a heavy competition. Generally, in case a niche segment is having a heavy competition, then it's no longer a niche segment. Unless you really have a lot of money there and nobody else is trying to solve a problem which you are trying to solve. So again, if you are trying to enter into a niche segment, you would not need any of these strategies which we've been talking about, like entering into this, etc., etc. Solving the right market problem becomes the key to success in a niche segment, because you know that how do you define a niche? It's an area which has a market potential, but then you do not find a lot of customers there. You are having a differentiation in your product. You're offering something which nobody else can copy very quickly. So these are the qualities your product should have when you are speaking about niche.
All right. There's this question by Kunal, who's asking, when your product is growing, how do you cross the charts for non-linear growth, especially with limited funding?
I'm not sure if I got the question right. Can you please repeat the question?
Sure. When your product is growing, how do you cross the charts for non-linear growth, especially with limited funding?
Okay, now this is an interesting one, and especially for a startup community with limited funding, how do you grow and grow exponentially? This is what I've figured out. Now, if you are a startup and you really want to grow exponentially and you really want to be there in the market, you really need funding. Now, this is why people are running after the VCs and other funding and trying to join an accelerator or an incubator program, because see, with your limited resource, there's very limited things which you can do. Maybe word of mouth, or you are actually going to social media, waiting for your friends to do marketing for yourself. But if you want to be in the market and you know that you are solving the real market problem, and you are something which who can actually differentiate in the market, you need money. And then I think the VCs are also looking for something like that. So I think if you marry them together, you are sure to succeed. So again, I'm not sure whether I've answered the question straightforwardly, but then this is what I understand.
All right, Tej, I'll get back if in case Kunal asks another question in line to it. The next question is, how do we differentiate between customer feedback and noise?
Again, there are tricks to it, but in case you are actually doing, you take help of your data analytics or data folks on your team. What we do generally is that we go through a lot of these similar feedback. Now, we do a lot of text analytics in our organization. We also talk to our existing customers. With an existing customers, the problem with talking to existing customers is that you actually are catering to only 20% of the market. You are actually not able to not even hearing to the 80% of the potential customers in your field. So, when you're doing this 20%, the loud customers who are always complaining, obviously you cannot leave them. But then doing text analytics, trying to see whether the same customer is trying to give similar problems, or there are different customers. What about authenticity? What about the frequency of the same customers? All this together would help you in figuring out whether it's a noise or it's a repetitive feedback from all from your different customers.
All right. There's another question by Nirmala who's asking, how does the product team strike that delicate balance between sticking to the vision and adapting to a constant change?
Now, the product team, they have to stick to the vision, because ultimately the moment you lose your vision, you lose your product. So that is non-negotiable. How a product manager manages to stick to the vision is something which depends upon your skill and quality to interact and gel with your team. Now, I think, and obviously, when you're saying that you're following your vision, you cannot lose the sight of your day-to-day activities as well. So in some of these smaller organizations wherein a product manager would do both, like sitting with you on your while you're grooming your stories, and then also keeping a sight of the vision. There are larger enterprises as well wherein you see different roles. For example, a technical product manager and a strategic product manager, wherein a strategic product manager would be only looking towards the vision and trying to think things which might happen a year after, and there are technical product manager manages this. So again, a role clarity has to be there, but then again it depends upon the maturity of your organization, size of your organization, how and the state of your product as well. For example, a mature product might require a single product manager, while in an emerging or a growth product might require 2 product managers for the same thing.
All right, Tej, I guess that was the last question we have catered to, looking at the time. So I think now I should wind it up. So thank you very much, Tejswita, for a wonderful presentation. I'm really sorry that we have to just cut it through abruptly, because I just looked at the time and there's another session following it. And it was really lovely to hear your insights on how do product management decides what to build, how nicely you have covered the topic with examples like fall of Nokia because of low attention towards innovation. You've shared us the various metrics you shared. It was really commendable. And the next webinar I would just like to update all of you is from our data science webinar series, which is on importance of ethics in AI by Kunal Jain, founder Analytics Vidya. For other things, stay tuned to our events section on our website, nasscom.in. Thank you, Tejswita. Thank you for your time, and thank you all of you for your time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Ankita.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.